This video is sponsored by SKILLSHARE. Everyone knows that humor is important. It permeates our entertainment, is a huge part of social conversation, builds friendships and romantic relationships, affects culture, and so on. However, despite it being everywhere, it is seemingly rare that anyone thinks much about why, what it means to laugh and why we like to so much, and how this simple involuntary cackle of the voice can influence so much of the world. 20th century American writer E.B. White said that analyzing humor is like dissecting a frog. Few people are interested, and the frog dies of it. However, of course, people still dissect frogs because some people are interested. And unlike the dissection of a frog, arguably, the outcome of looking into the nature of humor reveals something beautiful. Of course, there are many different types of comedy: stand-up comedy, comedy films, theater, music, literature, commonplace conversational humor, and so on. Furthermore, there are many subgenres within each category of comedy. However, what's interesting is what seemingly strings them all together: the ingredients of a comedic occurrence and the gravitational pull that we all feel towards it. There are several theories on the nature of humor and what makes a funny thing funny. However, one of, if not the primary and most popularly accepted theory, is known as the Incongruity Theory. Simply put, the Incongruity Theory suggests that something is funny when one realizes a difference between what is expected and what actually happens. A discrepancy between a person's concept of a thing and their perceptual experience of the thing when both are supposed to go together, but don't. This theory was proposed, accepted, and discussed by renowned philosophers like James Beatty, Immanuel Kant, Arthur Schopenhauer, and Soren Kierkegaard. In reference to this principle, Kierkegaard said, "Man is the only animal that laughs and weeps, for he is the only animal that is struck with the difference between what things are and what they ought to be." Coinciding with the incongruity theory, 21st century behavioral scientist Peter McGraw crafted a theory known as the benign violation theory, in which it is suggested that humor is found when a violation or disruption of one's expectations or sense of normality occurs, but more specifically, only when the violation is felt as benign. In other words, the violation does not cause any real harm to the person perceiving it. This of course means that one's sense of humor is relative to their perception of how the world is or ought to be, as well as their perception of what is harmful or offensive within it. Regardless of the relativity of one's sense of humor, generally everyone's returns to the same principle of experiencing something unexpected, irrational, or incongruent, which begs the question: why is it that when something goes wrong, when something is close to being painful, or when something dupes the rational mind, do we experience it as funny and pleasurable? It is in the nature of the human being to take him or herself fairly seriously. A human is both consciously and rationally aware of itself, and so what option is there other than to be conscious and rational about itself and its existence? However, the experience of something humorous confronts us with the realization that our logic and sensibility is, at least in the instance, inadequate or incongruent with reality, that we didn't and couldn't know what was going to happen on the other side of the joke or comedic occurrence. 20th century existentialist philosopher Albert Camus writes, "Man stands face to face with the irrational. He feels within him his longing for happiness and for reason. The absurd is born of this confrontation between the human need and the unreasonable silence of the world." And so, how does a rational being confront the idea that its existence might not be rational, but rather absurd? Perhaps the answer is simply to laugh. We all share in the same susceptibility of being wrong and coming face to face with the apparently unknowable in different conditions of the universe. The ultimate comedian is life itself, as it apathetically mocks our attempts to put our foot on it. No matter our attempts to attribute meaning to existence, no matter anyone's sense of truth, it is fair to argue that the only truth anyone can ever be sure of is that they can't be sure of their own truth. And perhaps it is obligatory here to say that this might not even be true. Regardless, the point is, there is an inherent longing for certainty in human life, a longing that manifests itself in all kinds of ridiculous ways, ways that can be harmful, misleading, or despairing. Humor helps us counterbalance this. It helps us lighten up a little when we fall too deeply into ourselves as individuals and as collectives. It helps us realize things aren't always as they seem, nor as serious. It reminds us of how little we know about what might happen next, and that we shouldn't think too pompously of oneself or live with too cold or too rigid of beliefs that claim ultimate power or certainty in the absurdity of life. It shows us that we're all pretty goofy and foolish, but that that's okay, and that we should share in the laughter rather than fight over the despair. Interestingly, many philosophers of the past, including some of the aforementioned, negatively critiqued humor's role in the human condition. Immanuel Kant argued that the joy of laughter is purely physical rather than intellectual. He posed the question that if to be human is to be rational and seek rational understanding, how could it be positive to realize and experience the irrational? However, if in fact we do exist in an absurd relationship with the universe, is it not of value that we can and do transmute the absurdity into playfulness, enjoyableness, and happiness? Is that not the most rational thing left to do? The role of the comedian is no different than the artist or the philosopher, the filmmaker or the musician, to turn the mundane into the exciting, the bleak into the enjoyable, the confusing into the discernible, and to help us better consider and adapt our perspectives of the world with sincerity and honesty only possible to the medium. Perhaps not all comedy and humor can be seen as positive, but fundamentally, in every well-intended comedic moment, there exists an attempt to transmute the conscious experience of the absurd and chaotic into something pleasurable, earnest, playful, clever, or interesting. And in every experience of laughter, we are reminded of how foolish we are, but how joyful we can be nonetheless. This video was sponsored by SKILLSHARE. Before saying anything further about SKILLSHARE, it's important to quickly reiterate that all sponsors on this channel do not affect the content or topics covered. Furthermore, all brands and products promoted are filtered in order to ensure that they are considerate of you, the viewer, and might provide real value. With that, SKILLSHARE is this video's sponsor. If you aren't familiar, SKILLSHARE is an online learning community with thousands of classes covering dozens of creative and entrepreneurial skills. SKILLSHARE's unique, curated source of information can help you more easily learn about new subjects, better understand various skills, or assist you in the development of your career. With an annual subscription cost of less than $10 a month, SKILLSHARE is very affordable, especially when considered against higher-priced in-person classes and workshops. It is also worth knowing that a premium membership gives you unlimited access, so you can join any and all of the classes and communities that might be of interest. Specifically, an excellent course on creative writing and storytelling entitled Creative Writing Essentials, Writing Standout Opening Scenes is a very accessible yet intelligent, thoughtful course available on SKILLSHARE, in which the course instructor, Daniel Jose Older, shares a peek into his writing and editing process as he navigates through one of his published novels, Shadow Shaper, contrasting the first draft from the final draft, showcasing what improvements were required along the way. The course provides helpful considerations of things related to scene construction and character development, especially in terms of the opening scene of a story. If writing is at all of interest, this course is one worth checking out. Because SKILLSHARE is sponsoring this video, there is a link in the description to sign up for a 2-month free trial. Of course, thanks so much for watching, and see you next video.